Hey guys, welcome back, and welcome if you're new. It is beautiful outside, so I decided to film out here because it's spring and it's warm and there's a slight breeze, but it's still pretty enough and warm enough to film out here. So anyway, as you can tell from the title below, we are in part 3 of my mini-series on Let's Talk Midwives and Midwifery. And if you haven't seen the first two, the first one I talked about in part 1 about what midwives were and the different kinds and what they do. And then in the part 2 of this series, I also talked about what the differences between a midwife and an OBGYN are and their differences. And so if you're interested in any of those, I'll link them in the description below. I'll also link up here in the card section the playlist I have for all of these parts in this series, and so you can go ahead and check that out if you're interested. So anyway, today on part 3 we're going to be talking about why I chose a midwife at my births, why I chose to use a midwife, and also I'm going to be talking a lot about my experience with that and really how my experience has been, what I've experienced, and all those kinds of things. So I'm excited to get into this video, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Also, for those of you who are new, I am pregnant with my 3rd child, and so I've had 2 previous births, and so with both kids I have used a midwife. My first child, I did have a hospital birth, but it was a transfer, so I had planned a home birth, and it ended up having to go to the hospital with my second. She was born at home. So just a little bit of the background there. And so I've used a midwife throughout all of my births, and I've been continuing to use a midwife with this pregnancy also. So anyway, so the first thing I want to talk about is why I chose a midwife for my birth. Or births. And that really comes with a lot of backstory. Not a lot, but a little bit. So I grew up, for those of you who aren't new, you know I grew up in a family of 9 children. My mom did mostly home births. She had a couple hospital births. She also had a cesarean, an emergency C-section with my twin sisters. And so I've had a lot of experience with midwives and OBGYNs, hospitals, and all that kind of stuff just growing up. And so, but her go-to care provider with every child was always a midwife. And even with all the hospital births, I believe she always had her midwife with her, even in the hospital setting. And so she really advocated for midwives, and I grew up just being surrounded by a midwife, going to prenatal appointments with my mom. And so that's just what I'm used to. And so for me, why I chose a midwife really was because it was what was natural, normal to me. It's literally what I thought of doing going into having children. Going into motherhood, I always assumed I would just give birth with a midwife. And so that's number 1 reason, is I grew up with it. I've literally been around it my entire life, and I have known nothing else. And so, I mean, I have known the hospital care system too, so that's another reason why I chose midwifery, because I saw a lot of the hospital side of things and didn't like it, for me personally. So yeah, anyway, also just a little disclaimer here, I'm not, if you're more comfortable in a hospital setting, that's totally fine with you. This is literally, I'm talking mostly about why I chose. These are the reasons I chose a midwife, and then I'll be talking about my experience. So this isn't something I'm putting on other people. This is just what my experience has been. And so anyway, those are the main reasons I chose to have a midwife, was really just because that's what I'm used to. That's what I have grown up with, and that's just that. So another reason why I chose a midwife is because I educated myself throughout either my mom helping me through the education process as a teenager, but also afterwards. I educated myself while I was when I got married, before I got married, after I got married, while I was pregnant with my first child, and I'm continuing to educate myself as I have more children. But just because of the education has drawn me to a midwife. Midwives have been doing this for thousands of years. Literally since the beginning, there was always been a midwife or someone with the woman. And I believe midwife means with woman, I believe. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it means. And so there's always been someone, so the idea is to be with the woman in labor. and you're with them. You're not there to control the situation, you're there to naturally move through the process. And so that's really what a midwife does. And they're also healthcare professionals, so they've been trained, most of them, professionally, either trained through school or through just being an apprentice. And so they've had training, they've had formal training of some sort. So just, yeah, the education has brought me to midwifery and just having that in my birth. So anyway, also, let's see, another reason I chose to have a midwife is really the model of care that they give. And the model of care is so relationship based and individual based that I just can't see myself being with an OB where that relationship just is not there. And not every OB is like this, but I would say on the most, on an average scale, this is the way it is. They spend about 10 minutes per visit with you, whereas a midwife is going to spend anywhere from upwards from 30 minutes to an hour with you per visit. And she just really, most of the time, it's like 10 minutes spent with just monitoring your baby, checking sizes, figuring out how your body's doing and baby's doing. And so that's like the checkup part of it. And then they move on from there to literally just giving, like talking. You just talk about stuff going on in your pregnancy, in your life, how mentally you're thinking about birth, and then education stuff that you just talk about birth. And you just spend a lot of time with your midwife. She gets to spend a lot of time with you, getting to know you, how you birth, how you think, and that's all gonna play really well into your birth. And so anyway, that's another reason, is just I love their model of care. It's just so genuine, it's so personal, and it's time. They spend time with you and they really get to know you. Another reason is because I believe a midwife is better for normal low-risk pregnancies. I believe that they bring a better outcome than the hospital does for natural pregnancy, for low-risk pregnancies anyway. I would say that the hospital, a lot of times, they don't bring out as a good outcome. They don't always. A lot of natural births have happened at the hospital, but I would say on an average and on an average base and normal basis, midwives really have that. They give a really good outcome on birth. And so it's just, I think that it's better fitted for a natural birth. They are better fitted for your natural birth without interventions, and if you want to do it all completely natural. So another reason is I will also always have a midwife no matter what kind of birth I have. Their education is just so critical. So like, they don't just know like what could go wrong. They know what could go right. They know the ins and outs of birth. They know women's bodies. Like, you know, their whole education is surrounded by how things go naturally and what could go wrong and all these things. And granted, an OB is better for things that go wrong because they're trained in surgery and C-sections and high-risk scenarios. But a midwife is going to really bring that education and know of what you can and cannot do and what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And they're not going to push you. They're going to let you make choices on your own. And so that's really their model of care is like that. So, you know, having a midwife, no matter what the circumstance, if I have an OB and I have to have a C-section, I still want my midwife there in order to encourage me, to help me through this, and to really put my mind at ease that I'm doing the right thing. And so yeah, anyway. My last reason is why I chose a midwife. I could go on and on about the reasons, so I'm just going to end here with this one. My husband completely supported it. He was 100% on board. He wasn't as familiar with home birth as I was. His mom, all three of her kids at the hospital, but he still thought it was so cool, and he really just thought that it was the most natural thing anyway. Since the beginning of time, we've been having midwives attend our birth anyway. And also, like, God created our bodies to do this naturally, and so granted, yes, things happen and it doesn't always go the right way, but he was like, yeah, totally, this makes total sense. And so you know, that's just, those are the reasons. I want to sneak one more reason in there. I know I said this was the last one, but I wanted to have a home birth, and I didn't want to do it unassisted. So that's why I chose a midwife, because she's the best suited for a home birth. And doctors don't do home births anymore. I haven't heard of an OB in years who will attend your home birth. I wish they still did, but they don't. And so midwives are great for that because they have been doing it for hundreds, thousands of years. And so that was just my obvious choice. So anyway. Alright, so next we're going to talk real quick about my experience, how my experience has been using a midwife with all 3 of my kids. And obviously my 3rd child is still in utero, so I don't know how that birth's going to work out, but I'll talk a little bit about how my prenatals have been and all that kind of stuff. So my experience has been amazing. I love it. Like, even with my first son, like I had mentioned, he was a transfer to the hospital. My midwife, she was so smart and on the ball. She totally like worked around every problem. She knew what to do. She was like, well, okay, this isn't happening, so then I think you need to go to the hospital. Oh, and if you guys are interested in watching or listening to my birth story on my first son and my daughter, I'll link them up here in the card section and down below too. But my birth stories, I have them on my YouTube channel, so if you're interested in listening to those and seeing how those both turned out, you can go check those out. But she did an amazing job with Judah's birth. Even afterwards, after we got back from the hospital, she came back like she usually does the day after, and she was just making sure that we were doing good. And also, like, during that whole process, she was very calm, and she really, I was very impressed with how well she handled the situation. And she just automatically was like, yep, you need to be transferred, so let's go. And it wasn't like this, oh, well, what are the doctors gonna think? Or, oh, she had nothing like that, in her mind. And even when we got to the hospital, like, I could tell that the OB had a chip on their shoulder because my midwife was there, which is stupid. I'm sorry, but no, this is dumb. It's how I chose to birth, and so you need to back up and get that chip off your shoulder. Now, I understand that some OBs, it's uncomfortable. They're not used to midwives or whatever, and that's totally fine. But if you can't bring a healthy atmosphere to a birth that you really were not supposed to be in the first place, you probably should not be there, or you need to fix your attitude. And so she finally, the OB on call, she's nice. I don't want to put her under the bus, but at the same time, she came into the room with this aura or whatever of like, oh my gosh, she's a transfer. And I'm like, you know what? I'm in pain. I don't care what you think. And I didn't. And so really, thankfully, Ashley, my midwife, had a good head on her shoulders, and so nothing was said. Everything was good. And at the end of it, the OB was fine, and she totally pushed aside her preconceptions. So anyway, but with that to say, I kind of rambled on there, but she just handled herself really well. She didn't, get all furious over the OB acting the way she did. She totally was calm and let the hospital take care of me. And then she also stayed there for everything. So she was there to help me through the whole process of like, okay, I need you to be there for me. And my husband and I, this is, first time we're doing this. My mom was there. Everyone was there. And so between she and my mom, they kind of advocated for me, and so that was awesome. Within an hour he was born. It wasn't a big deal. But I just, again and again, she has shown such amazing results for me. With my second birth, we were having a home birth and everything, and I was pushing, and I had a cervical lip, which I've had with both kids, and hopefully not with this one, but and so there's just a part of my cervix that wasn't quite dilated. And so she was like, oh, this is the same thing that's kind of happening. She didn't say that to me, I know she was thinking about it, and then I was thinking about it, and then we just had to move. She was like, you know what, I think you need to get out of the water, and I think you need to go pee, or you need to walk or something. Sure enough, I get up, which I hated, but she was gentle and firm enough to tell me that I needed to do something different. And so she literally like told me, you need to get out of the water and go pee or something. And so I did. Sure enough, 5 minutes after getting to the bathroom, the Kyla was born. And so she's just very knowledgeable, and so my experience really has not been bad at all. Through the experience with the hospital, as much as I hated having to go through that, I'm really glad that I did. And she was amazing through that. With my home birth, which almost ended up having to call someone for, ended up fine, because she thought, and she really, well, she didn't freak out. And so I'm sure she felt like it in some ways, but she didn't. And so again, my experience has been really good. I was very thankful to each time just be in labor in my own atmosphere, in the atmosphere of my home, in a calm, amazing, it's amazing, okay? The feeling of just being in your own home where you're comfortable and nothing, you know, it's just calming, relaxing. And so both experiences have been amazing. And so with every prenatal experience with each kid, it's been awesome too, because she bends over backwards to make sure I'm feeling comfortable, like I know what I'm going, like I understand what I'm going through. And so that's been really nice. With my first, again, I don't know what it was about my first experience as a mom, but my first pregnancy was really good, but in the beginning I had a UTI infection, and I was so scared that I was going to lose the baby, because it was 14 weeks, and you know, when you're a first time mom, you just get scared. And it doesn't matter how many siblings you had, like me, I still freaked out. And so yeah, I had a UTI infection, and so she just was there on call with me throughout the night. I could text her any time of the day. I was sick. Ugh, it was awful. I had to go to the hospital. She was able to help me through that whole process, and so to get my antibiotics, and it was good. But it was just, you know, again, she's just bent over backwards, and the model of care that they have is so personal that my experience was so amazing. And so not everyone's experience with a midwife or even an OB or their experience is the same. I just had a really good experience with every kid. And with this pregnancy so far, I've had an amazing experience too. I've been able to, each kid I've kind of said no to a lot more things. And with this one especially, and she's been totally cool with that. She's like, well, you can totally just opt out. And so I opted out of a lot of the screenings. I took one blood thing, and that was it, and I'm not doing it with the next one if I can help it. And so but yeah, she's been awesome about that. So yeah, anyway, all I can say is my experience was really good. And so yeah, anyway, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it was very informative, and that, you know, if you had any questions on how my experience went, that I hope it was very informative. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to answer as many as I can. Hopefully with the next video coming out, we're going to be talking about how to choose a midwife and what the different tips I have for that, and a couple other things we're talking about. But also I'm going to be hopefully bringing it on to this series, my midwife and my mom separately, and kind of interview them. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. And so yeah, anyway, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.